are doing season 3 now.
Alrighty, welcome to this week's episode of Learning and Unlearning. Today's one's a very, very interesting one, right? So essentially we're going to consider and explore how men show up in their romantic relationships with women, or at least how we perceive them, approach them, and navigate them ultimately. So having worked hard to establish that men too are complex, emotional, and vulnerable beings, which is kind of what we go for in this show. We'll consider what freedom, space, and protections men require in these relationships. And today we're joined by Khanyisile Madonko, who will join us in sharing some of these experiences. So welcome, Khanyisile, aka Khanyi Twitter. What's the other aka?
Nate Love.
Nate Love, okay. Later on, you need to give us a bit of context about where that name comes from.
Nate Love Madonko.
Okay. Okay. That's not his Instagram name, but he might change it. He might change it. So,
like his second account.
So thanks so much for joining us, Khanyi. We're really looking forward to this conversation. And, you know, at the end of the day, I think in the previous season, we realized just how much sharing some of our experiences and some of our stories, how helpful that can be for a lot of men. Because ultimately, we're trying to demonstrate to guys that, like, A, you're not alone in some of these experiences, and that the opportunity to unlearn the toxic behaviors that make us violent, especially towards women, are things that you can work on, things we can nip in the bud, and things that we can hold our friends accountable to.
It's also things that come from complex places.
Exactly, things that come from complex places, and you know, not doing the whole Twitter discourse thing about we're this or we're that, but really delving into, you know, the depths of our personality. So today we're having a conversation like that because I think romantic relationships are they're more complex than we like to make them out to be. You know, our generation, again, the Twitter generation, we like to simplify everything. Everything's black and white. It's either women are greedy or men are this or abusive, whatever the case may be. But we're really, really trying to delve deep into some of those things. So the conversation will be guided by a number of questions, and then I'll point to who needs to speak. And I'm joking. Feel free to chip in wherever. But we'll start with the first sort of discussion point, and I'll direct it to you, Khanyi. So what variables do you consider when determining your readiness for a relationship, and how has this changed over time, particularly in your young adulthood? Because high school doesn't count. I'm joking, it does.
I mean, so looking at, I'm trying to trace back to the relationships I've been in, but also looking at what I say to other people, my mentees, for example. I think when I look inwardly, so I look at myself for the most part, and this is something that's actually new. I didn't have this thing of, I would jump from one relationship to the next, purely because I really believe in, you know, I deserve love or something of that sort. But I realized that there is this thing called baggage. You know, that is, you carry one. There are ways in which we're brought up that we carry into these romantic relationships, whether be it positive or be it negative. You know, there are things from our upbringing that we take into relationships that we have to unlearn, you know, or amplify within the confines of a relationship. And also there are then things that you learn within the confines of a prior relationship, for example, where there are toxic behaviors that become normalized within the confines of a prior relationship, such that you carry that into the next relationship thinking that is how a normal relationship should be.
Absolutely.
My biggest encounter has been, I tend to have a savior complex as an individual, purely because of where I come from and what I lacked as a child.
Okay.
And therefore, there is an inherent need, and it's not a want, it's actually a need, to never see anyone struggle, to the extent that I then overcommit myself to things to my own detriment. So I keep on giving and trying to give off of myself even when I have nothing to give. You understand? It's sort of a case of whatever you're lacking, I'll find a way to do it. You know?
So maybe unpack why that is for a second. Why do you think that is, at least?
So I grew up in a very interesting household. I think I try to use public platforms to now educate around sexual abuse amongst young men. I think I was abused as a child extensively by both men and women. And it really shaped my perspective of relationships. You know, for example, when I got into a relationship as a younger man, in my 16 to 18, when you're just getting into inquisitive. Sorry, guys, the Zimbabwean jumps.
Y'all speak the best English though.
Yeah, Zimbabweans speak the best English. Literally, come on, bro.
So when we got very curious about sex and about those things, you know, I couldn't indulge in. And I remember my friends even laughing at me in boarding school, where they'd always say, "Your girlfriend comes to your house every other day. Are you telling us that for real, you guys are not indulging in intercourse?" And I said, yes. You know, and the full extent to which you can discuss the reasons why is not a comfortable topic, especially amongst young men.
Yeah, dude.
You know, so when you say, I come from a place where I've had sex since I was 4 years old. I've been exposed to that kind of infrastructure since I was a kid.
Jeez,
and I'm not at a point where mentally I can do it on my terms because I don't trust that I can. To an extent that till date, they say that, I remember a partner of mine said, "You have no spontaneity." And I said, yeah, when you've lived a life like mine, I think it's okay, even when we're being spontaneous, to just ask, are you okay with us doing this? You know?
Damn.
Because for me, it's not about...
Control, right?
Yes.
You have a sense of control.
Yeah. But also, it's I never got the opportunity to say yes. You know, I never got the opportunities to agree.
It's a privilege,
Exactly.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where it should be.
Where should it be? But like, that's what you're making us realize.
So it was that really. I think we don't, and I was talking to my uncle actually the day before yesterday, and I was saying, be mindful of, his son is 5 years old, and I said, be mindful of the things that you expose him to. You might think you just want the best for him, you just want to do all these great things for him, but sometimes what you don't realize is you're neglecting the aspects of him that actually need you.
Yeah.
So you think you're doing the best for his career, the best for, because you're just pushing school, pushing all these things to the extent that I think maybe without political correctness, black families neglect emotional intelligence the most. We are some of the, I know I am, most emotionally unintelligent people. Right? And it's not because we're not capable of being intelligent in that regard. It's because of the background, the upbringing, the rhetorics around indoda must, or the rhetorics around a boy doesn't cry. Or, you understand? So you can't even go to your mother and say, hey, there's something weird that uncle did.
Yeah.
You know, it was
Where do you even start the
not
conversation?
normal. Instead, you can't discuss that with her because she might say, no, you're lying. Or, that's your uncle, he wouldn't do that to you, you know? So I think, speaking for me, I did carry that into relationships. Sure. And I have a tendency of overcompensating. I have a tendency of wanting to be more, even when I am more in that particular regard. So to add to
always cross the line.
Yes. And it took a whole lot of work to come to terms with the fact that sometimes I need people to show up for me as well. You understand? I can't buy love. I don't need to buy love. I don't need to act a certain way.
Sometimes there shouldn't be conditions.
Yeah. There shouldn't be conditions around, I love you because you really are great at typing. Sometimes it should
Can you do
be,
this for me?
I really love you, and that's it. Without the condition that says, because you're capable of. You know, I used to say to one of my exes, and I said to her, you know, the worst thing I've experienced from my previous partners is being an ideal husband. They loved the idea of me.
Unpack that for a second. That's because there's a definition behind anything.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Talk to me about that.
So my understanding of it was, I'm the model husband, not the model boyfriend. The fun-loving boyfriend who you date now and have fun with now. I'm not that. But when someone considers settling down and they want a husband, I'm the picture of that. And therefore, going into relationships that I went into, they first realized that I was, in my understanding of it, I was great for the future, I was not great for now. So if it was a case of...
Yes, that's a tension, bro.
Yes.
Quite a tension.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So it's I've gotten a lot of that. You're ambitious, you're all these things, but I don't think we can be together right now. Why can't we be together?
I'll see you when I'm 35.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So there's a whole lot of that I had to deal with, and also be discerning in how I approach partners. You know, to say one person perceived me a certain way, it doesn't mean the next person will.
Yeah.
But I also need to be conscious of the fact that maybe this is a trend. Maybe this is what women generally see.
Yeah.
You know, at least in me, not women in the broad aspect. I can't speak for what other women see in other men.
Yeah.
But my experience speaks to, I'm not a now thing.
Yeah.
I'm a future thing.
Yeah.
And that has been a significant part of my experience in looking at relationships. You know?
So what's interesting about that is it sounds to me that you have found a way to share that with some of your partners, because I know a lot of guys. One of my friends said something interesting recently at a dinner thing that she was hosting, that guys catfish women into relationships, except with us it's not like a looks thing, but we catfish them with personality, money, all of those things. So to what extent, and I'll start with you, gentlemen, before we come to you, Kanye, do you share anxieties about problems in your life with your partner? So essentially, have you ever found yourself catfishing your way into a relationship only to reveal the real you after? Or have you found yourself in an empowered position where you didn't have to end up on MTV and catfish? So I'll start with you, Jimmy, and then Tammy.
I think it's that potential discussion, right?
Okay.
And I think, like, you know, you think back to our time in our undergrads.
Yeah.
All of us were super, super, super high potential. And, you know, we had a similar discussion in the previous episode about, like, how, like, what made people desirable in that space. But, like, we were high potential, right?
Yeah.
And to the extent that we're still high potential and buy into the possibility of reaching and achieving that potential, I do think that's something that, like, my partners have seen and almost hedged bets against. Right?
I see.
Like it's so I'm the opposite of you, right? Like I'm let me great time now. I'll see in the future. Like I'm hedging my bets. There might be something there.
Yeah.
But it's the potential conversation in terms of whether or not I've catfished people into it. I think there was a time where I was quite dishonest about, like, how I structured and built relationships. But it wasn't necessarily that was more about, like, character than it was about, like, the operational nitty-gritties of a relationship and how I'm able to, like, attend to those. But it's I think there's been extents to which in previous relationships I've sort of committed myself to doing something that I either I'm unsure about my ability to follow through on.
Yeah.
Or know that like, okay, I'm saying this, but like, I don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
Right? But I think, for the most part, and I think recently, no. I think I specifically, whether in my friendships, whether in romantic relationships, I'm so wary of, like you were saying, overextending myself. Right? Because I've realized, we had a similar conversation in the previous episode about like how like we derive a benefit from our partners being feminists.
Yeah.
And I've come to realize that I require that kind of relationship because it's the only one where I can feel safe and where I can feel valued and wanted, right?
Yeah.
Because I think, sorry to like extend the conversation so much, but I think we're so used to there being conditions to our rights to receive affection, right? Like whether it's as a young boy where in like a school setting it's your athletic abilities, or it's, and then you go into a man and it's your ability to provide and display financial dominance. There's all of these conditions that are constantly like placed on us that we are required to fulfill in order to deserve love and in order to deserve affection. And I am so wary of that because I can't cope. The rejection of like failing to meet those standards and that threshold is something that I've come to realize I struggle with really, really deeply, right? So I'm so deliberate around structuring my, especially romantic relationships, but also my really, really deep friendships, right? Like I think, so we share a household, but like in effect we sort of share finances, partly also because we run a business together, but like we share everything, right? He knows at any given point where I'm at, where I stand financially, and the same goes for me with him. And it was the same in my romantic relationships, just because I feel this need to manage expectations all the time, because you know, if an expectation is thrust upon me, and the thing about like being a man is expectations will be thrust upon you. I'd prefer to create a scenario or a situation where I am, where I've managed your expectations and I said I'm capable of here to here.
Yeah.
Fucking talk to me about it.
Yeah. So tell me, with you, I wanna sort of explore the angle of marriage, because you're the only married guy at the table in like 4 years. So I mean, on your so you, there's something we don't know.
Yeah, it's on the record.
I don't know. Yeah, now it's on camera. But you know, having been married for 4 years, obviously marriage is seen as the ultimate space of vulnerability and expressing anxieties and things like that. But have you found yourself clutching back to catfishing your partner at times because you're afraid of sharing anxieties? You know, like what's the dark side of that? Yeah, if you don't mind explaining.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's very tricky. Okay, I'll start pre-marriage, because I'll specifically talk about my relationship with my wife Busi.
Yeah.
And then I'll talk in marriage, because I think it's such a, because the thing is, the reason why you catfish, not because it's malicious. It's not always malicious.
Right.
It's because you're putting your best foot forward. You're putting the most aspirational version of yourself on the table, and you're punting that for as long as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And so I remember Busi saying this to me when we were now knee deep in our relationship. We had a very confusing conversation. I was confused about that sentiment, because I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Because when Busi and I, first dated, I was at Wits at the time and she was at UCT. I had a little bit of a political career on campus, so that automatically means, if you're from Wits, if you're a politician at Wits, you're basically a rapper, dude. You're like a rock star. It's weird. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just one of those.
Now.
Yeah, it might have changed now, But back in my day, but anyway.
Yeah, for real. Rockstars.
You know, so it was that, you know, like, campus is a district, right? So you're able to like kind of derive the feeling of a community being behind you.
Yeah.
And you embody that, and you start to kind of dress yourself up as that every day.
Yeah.
And you show up in the world, you know, with the next vote in mind. It's something that it's a disposition that you can actually take on.
Yeah.
And only in hindsight did I realize how dangerous it was for me at the time. Because what that meant was not only for, I guess, my intimate relationships, but also for me, it meant that I could only live up to a specific expectation of myself, because I feel like I have to be consistent to what's out there in public. Do you see what I'm saying? And again, it's a microcosm of what can happen to, I guess, people who can be celebrated in any way in society, but it's real.
Yeah.
So anyway, by the time, so this means that what are the characteristics one would embody? So I do consider myself a charismatic person, but I would punt that only. You get me? So I'm only charismatic, and I'm only extroverted.
Yeah.
And I only think about deep shit, you know, like, or I'm only this and I'm only that, you know what I mean? And
You don't chat, you engage in
engage in discourse. You know what I mean? Like, I don't chat, I don't have a conversation.
Yeah.
And all those kinds of things, right? And that's who Busi met. Tommy the politician, you know, and not the vulnerable kid. Yeah, you know what I mean? Because it's ridiculous. That's why, you know what I mean? It is ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? Because it's literally adhering to a caricature you've created of yourself in real time every day. It's dangerous.
Being a man's
You see what I'm saying? So I did that, I think, but I didn't realize I was doing that.
Yeah.
And I remember now
something.
Yes.
What did you think would happen if you stopped?
Let me get there.
Yeah.
So I do One Day Leader, right? Which is like a TV show trying to find South Africa's next great leader. Worse.
That's a bad premise.
Yeah, that's a bad premise, right? South Africa's next great leader in SABC1. It's a TV show. You're solving people's problems. You know what I mean? You're a hero. Part of the campaign, for example, part of the gig is that you have to get votes to stay on the show, and the one with the most votes wins. You know what I mean? So it's like a presidential situation where you debate, you solve community problems, and you garner people, you know, to vote for you, etc. Now, if you thought that like me deriving specific expectations from a crowd in varsity was dangerous, you don't know what it's like when you're on SABC1 and there's 700,000 people watching you on a weekly basis. It's far worse.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? As insofar as what the layers you put on yourself, and what ends up becoming part of your DNA, you know? And then, unfortunately, don't do as well as I would have hoped on the show, right? So I get out, I think in the semi-final or whatever, and it depresses me incredibly. And then what happens is that as a result of me getting off that show, because now I know what it's like to get hype on campus, I know what it's like to get hype on a public media platform.
You had the highest votes in SRC history, right?
Like something like that, you know what I'm saying? And so now I don't realize how much of people's validation defined who I am for myself. I don't actually realize it until I crash out of One Day Leader.
Yeah.
And I take a sabbatical and I take a break and I have to kind of refine myself.
Yeah.
And
it's that you don't have to worry about how much people's validation affects you because you have it.
Exactly. But again, I don't know that, right?
Exactly.
I don't know that conclusively yet.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've not settled into that disposition. And it became a journey of kind of repurposing who I am. Not even repurposing who I am almost, but trying to refine who I was before all this stuff that I put on to fulfill my ambitions. You know what I'm saying? Because again, it comes from a good place. It doesn't come from a terrible attention-seeking place. It comes from a place where you believe that you can be significant and impactful in the world.
Yeah.
And once that part of me started to unravel, Busi said something to me that I don't think came with malicious intent at the time, but I took it very malicious. I took it as like, it was a malicious statement.
Yeah.
You know, she was like, hey man, look, I feel like you tricked me because, you know, I came and, you know, you were this like bubbly, this, that guy, but now you so much more introverted, you're so much more vulnerable, and you don't want to go out, you don't want to see people anymore, and all those kinds of things. And it really hit me terribly, because it felt like, but like, you're not buying into who I am.
Yeah.
But also, can I just say something to that? And I think, may my father's soul rest in peace, he shared a gem with me. I remember it was at a time where I was telling him, I think I'm ready for marriage.
Yeah.
And I'd like for us to proceed with, you know, going to the
traditional
house. And, you know, all of that was in the pipeline. And he said to me, son, are you sure you're ready for marriage? And I said, yes, I am. And he said, are you ready to say yes to all of them?
Whoa.
And I said, all of who? Because I'm with one woman. All of who? And he said, I'm talking about the different versions of that woman that you will come to meet
Yeah, it's a bomb.
in your life, because
That's a bomb.
you
Like,
met this woman.
unconditionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you ready to say yes to Tammy, who was a rock star at Vince, who was a rock star on TV, and then had a sobering moment during the TV show where he was so used to being at peak that loss for him thrust him out of the typical Tammy that you know, and that might have molded him into a new path and a different person, you know. And I'm just it's reawakened in my mind by that, to say, well, oblivious to the fact that people do change, right? And different things inspire different things in us. What happens today may inspire something different.
Yeah. So just to, it does move us on to the next part of the chat. And that, because you guys are sort of leading onto it, and the question around that is, do you think you're always deserving of love? And I think why this question is so interesting is because looking at the different parts of your personality and looking at your dad's, you know, very thought-provoking question around, are you ready to marry all of them? The key word here, always deserving of love. Do you think you're always deserving of love? I think we can start with you, and then we'll move on to you to sort of start wrapping it up. So let's start with you, Kanye. Do you think you're always deserving of love? And what else do you believe you deserve?
I definitely struggle with believing that I deserve love.
Okay.
So always is a stretch for me.
Wow.
It's there. I'm going above and beyond.
Yeah.
I say I'm always deserving of love, because for me, the best part of my life was love was transactional. I felt it was transactional, right? And you've got people like him who call you out for it, to say, dude, you don't need to do some of these things that you're doing. This person's your partner.
Wow.
Not a company you're trying to buy, or a suite you're trying to get off the rack, you know? So I've struggled with validation.
I see.
In the confines of relationships. You know, I and also vulnerability within relationships is a hard thing to find, especially if it's a heterosexual relationship.
Yeah.
And a woman, because there's an expectation that a man should be a certain way.
Right.
You understand? And so leading with vulnerability and leading with all your anxieties is one of the most difficult things, especially in today's world where there are Twitter standards for what relationships.
I like that word, Twitter standards.
It's a reality. We are in competition with what we see on Twitter in our relationships.
Right.
Because no one posts the bad side of their relationship.
At all.
You understand? And we're in constant competition with the 100 roses that were posted on Twitter. To the extent that if I can't meet those 100 roses, that 100 roses standard,
right,
I'm lesser than.
Right.
You understand?
Can you do the things that make your girlfriend trend?
Yeah. Oof,
so can I park a pink Range Rover with a box over it?
Yeah.
I think you know the additional complexity, right, is that it might not feel like a direct competition, but it is a direct competition.
Yeah.
Because what makes it so direct is that I think what I've noticed with like some of the relationships that some of my friends are in, and even like to an extent the relationships that I've been in, you're made acutely aware of, I can have that thing.
Yeah.
Right? I can find a person who can provide that thing for me.
Yeah.
But I even resent the statement that we catfish people into relationships, right? Because I don't think we're given scope to change in that thing. I think, so in my experience, right, I feel like let me not say I don't think we get, but I've to a large extent always felt like there are certain core values are core values, right? But like there will be moments where like a deviation from those values happens because of just the surrounding circumstances that generally flow from life, right? But I think to the extent that a relationship is conditional and your ability to access love and affection is conditional, then you don't have scope to change that. Assuming that's what your relationship looks like, right?
Yeah.
You definitely don't have the scope to.
You're in category. You have to shift. You shift and not change.
And
move forward.
And you can't fold, right? You can't fold because then you fail to meet the standards, right?
Yeah.
And where we live in a world where like it's your partner who's a woman can have that thing. If she wants a pink Range Rover, that we live in this like morally bankrupt society where like that thing you can have it.
Can I say something on that quickly? Before I just wrap up the part of my story.
Yeah.
So
we live in a world where you could literally pick and choose what you want in specific moments.
Yeah.
And there are people and things that are available right now that can fulfill a specific need in that moment in time.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's actually what we're competing against.
Yeah.
We may not even be competing against people.
Yeah.
We're competing against fluid things and concepts and trends, that can always be fulfilled in specific moments, which is wholly dangerous.
Yeah. So, Kanye? Always deserving?
Actually,
I think
the notion of always,
Well, inherently, and especially our generation that's more in touch with how we feel, that's more one with the fact that mental health is a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
We are always deserving of love.
Yeah.
Even a murderer, and I use this as a drastic perspective.
Right.
Even a murderer
Yeah.
is deserving of love.
Yeah.
Right? Always deserving of love because I think we are built that way as human beings. To give love and to take, to receive, not take.
Yeah.
To receive love. Right. I think it's a different conversation to say, is that what we always get? Because the reality of it is it's not.
Yeah.
In different confines of friendships, in different relationships, sometimes a person is not there for the pure intention of loving you.
True.
And you have to be one with that person.
You guys find that because of like the general discourse around how men relate to women, that like it's difficult to not enforce, but like affirm and say I require this, and this.
Because I was about to ask that as like, because the second part of the question asked, what else do you think you deserve? And I wanted to do like a quick round of, other than just love, what is that one other thing that you feel like sometimes you weren't empowered to admit that you low-key want that, but you do? Like head rubs for me. I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know. But I don't know. Well, we can start with you and then move all the way down. But what's that other thing? It could be kindness. It could be support of your career. It could be, I don't know, enjoying the things you enjoy as much as you do. It can be quote unquote pathetic to others, but for you, it's always been important. What is that?
Well,
what else do you think you deserve?
Yeah,
even if it's not deserved, but desired, low key.
100%.
So before I do answer that super directly, I also just want to just get onto this flow quickly about deserving love right?
Yes.
Everybody deserving love. It gets interesting because I believe there are moments where, and this is not just about love, it's about all other virtues that are nice for a relationship generally.
Right.
I guess kindness or what. You know, sometimes you can be in a moment in your life where you don't have the capacity to dispense it. You know what I'm saying? And I think for me, that was a huge part of my relationship towards when we started to seriously commit to each other. The conversation that we began to have, right? Because when you start to learn each other as a couple, and you start to learn each other even as friends generally, you can see, you can distinguish between seasons where this person is abundantly, pouring over this thing, and they have it in capacity for it, and their cup runneth over, and they can just share some with you. But you can also tell when they are running on empty and forcing themselves. And for me, my relationship came to a breaking point at some stage where I felt like I had poured out enough. Can I have some back? Do you see what I'm saying? And as soon as Busi and I really started to learn that dance, even before marriage, you know what I'm saying? Like, as soon as we started to understand that that in itself is a rhythm. Because in a world where we all deserve love, you won't always get love.
Yeah.
Because love is I don't think is an infinite commodity necessarily. You know what I'm saying?
Isn't how it's shown as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Like,
yes.
For me, like, and this is sort of just like how you'll skip me when we come back, right?
Are you sure?
I'm just like, I just want to make, this is a little point I wanted to make.
And then add your deserve as well.
Yeah. But I think, like, for me, like, love is always sort of like that preeminent, like that thing that's there as well. And it might not be coming out of me, but it's there. So it's not necessarily that, like, you might not be receiving it, right? But, like, I always make the example about how I try to navigate conflict, particularly, right?
Yeah.
I just because this is something I require in moments of conflict, but, like, with my partner, I try and navigate conflict in a way, in a manner where I still feel the need to protect her, even in that moment, right? Like, I think sometimes love doesn't look like this overt and explicit outpouring, right? Sometimes it takes different forms in different moments, but, like, for me, and at least in how I feel towards people, I do think it's always there, and it shows in various ways, right? So, like I said, when in a moment of conflict, I do
Conflict between you and the partner.
Conflict between me and my partner. I still feel a need and an obligation to protect you, and that because of that, I'm going to be circumspect with how I navigate that conflict. That's just like one example, right?
Okay. What do you think you deserve? Actually, I'll get back to, we'll do it after so that the flow, but very, very valuable. What do you deserve?
What do?
Or what would you like?
Look, I guess this helps because I did the love languages test.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, shout out to whoever came up with the love languages. That psychologist guy that became famous after that. Shout out to that guy still.
Deserve that.
He deserved that thing. So, I learned just from doing those, I guess, psychromatics, whatever they are, because I resonated with them, with the results. My love languages, I think physical touch, quality time. Yeah, those are my top ones.
Yeah.
Physical touch and quality time. So I like to spend time with my partner, and I like to spend time with my friends. And even if I see people very few and far between, I want those moments to be impactful. That's why I used to argue that learning and unlearning needs to be long form. You know what I mean? Because I like long form interactions with people generally.
But y'all don't listen.
Yeah, but it's okay. But physical touch as well is the real thing. You know what I mean? And physical touch is an interesting one because it has political connotations. We're always going to take it there, aren't we? But it has political connotations.
And it's fine if we do.
Yeah, it's fine if we do. This is the podcast, for goodness sake. But like, you know, like it's always a situation where it's something that as men, we feel like that's the one thing that a woman must provide always.
Yeah.
You get me? You know, which is very, very unfair. But like, I believe within the confines of safety and trust, you know, you can get away with a young belly rub or whatever, you know, whatever it takes to make a man feel in that specific moment in time. Words of affirmation is actually huge for me as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you can imagine how heightened that was during my university days as a kid.
Yeah.
And I couldn't really control that sensibility. And you know how just hyper it became during that time. But like now, in a world where I care about the words of those that matter, words really matter
So much, bro.
Yeah.
you know. So if I have conflict with Busi, for example,
Yeah.
I'm hyper aware of every word she'll say.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm hyper aware because I pick my words.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I pick
Because
my words
you-
very well
Because you want to protect.
because I value that. So I think I guess I'm taking it off the thing, the 5 love languages.
Yeah.
Physical touch, words of affirmation, and spending quality time.
Right? Kanye, real quick, what are yours?
I think for me, and this is largely informed by the transitional period that I'm in now. I've always said that as an entrepreneur, the person who dates you, there's a psychological element to it. Because unlike a person who has a permanent job, it's almost straightforward. You know, on the 25th or on the 15th of every month, something's gonna come in.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs, on the other hand, go through dry spells where 2-3 months
It's bad.
you're trying to lend clients, and all you're doing is approaching and not lending.
Or you're trying to get money that people actually owe you.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think in that regard, I think we deserve patience. And well, I know I deserve patience and I deserve understanding. But also I deserve to be with a partner who doesn't perceive of a relationship as something that's transactional. You know, if and I use the term partner strictly, right? It's different if I say my wife or but the minute I say my partner, it defeats the someone is a provider or your role to play.
Yeah.
It makes us a
Very good
player.
point.
Next time we are, whatever I am doing, whatever you are doing
Very
on a
powerful.
day to day, impacts your decisions that you make impact me as your partner, and likewise the decisions I make impact you.
Yeah.
We come as a package deal, and therefore those decisions that we make collectively. If
Yeah.
I was going to answer you earlier and say I lead with vulnerability.
Yeah.
Let me lay my situation bare. Be it I'm the richest man in the world, I'll lay that bare, or possibly the poorest person you will ever be with.
Yeah.
So that I always say honesty is demanded in relationships, even before relationships, because what you're affording a person in that particular juncture is you're allowing them the right to decide.
Yeah, you're being
They
fair.
can decide for themselves if this is their portion or not.
Okay.
You know, so
Yeah.
for me it's really the understanding aspect, but also the patience. I could build until it's the debate of Acrimony, the movie. You know, who was wrong and who was right. People have their perspectives, but the reality of it, there's also a psychology to there's also a psychological element to dating someone who is building something from scratch without backing from anyone.
Okay.
I want to steal that vulnerability one for myself as well, because I really think that's what broke us into being able to be sustainable for a life partnership.
Yeah.
Was to be able to say, I mean, back to what your dad said, because that is so profound, about would you be able to accept them all? That's a conversation, that's a question of vulnerability, right? Because we are a we are a spectrum of person as people. You know what I'm saying? But that spectrum can only be revealed in vulnerable circumstances.
Yeah.
And if one can firstly even be vulnerable with themselves, it can also translate into a habit where you can be vulnerable with your partner. And I think that's key. I expect that because I am that, because that's the only way to sustainably survive, to know that you can rise and fall, and you can show up in different shades given any moment in time, and that should be okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say that quickly.
Right. Do me real quick.
I think for me, sort of like drawing on both how Kanye and Tommy approached it, I think what I deserve is a person or a partner who makes an effort to understand how I want to receive affection and love.
Yeah.
I know how we're similar, you and I, in that, probably in that order even, that like I probably value physical touch above everything else. Quality time, not in the sense that I need to be able to spend time with you, but in the sense that I'm very, very time poor, especially lately. And to the extent that a person may prioritize me in their time means things I can't even like.
Means the world.
You know.
Yeah.
Just because like at any given, in order to commit to something slipping, right?
Yeah.
Especially at the point I'm in right now. So that's important to me. And then like affirming words of affirmation, not just because like because I require affirmation, but also because I'm very sensitive and I require soft landings. Right? It's I'm very, very circumspect with the words I choose. Like you were saying, right? I am the kind of person who navigates conflict from a protective place, and I generally endeavor to try and meet the needs of my partner. And obviously, I slip and I fail from time to time because that's what happens in relationships. But for the most part, I require someone who's going to believe me when I tell you who I am, and understand that that's going to be dynamic, right? That like I might have been able to do something, and I hate that it keeps coming back to like provision, but I might have been able to do something or provide something at one point, but like I won't be in another, right?
Yeah, and you should feel okay with that.
And you should feel okay with that because of like just all of the other, because I like to think of people as like a collection of different amenities, right? And I'd like to be accepted for the combination of human amenities that I provide, just purely on that basis. So I guess acceptance, patience as well, but someone who makes an effort to show me love the way I'd like to receive it, because I know that's something I reciprocate.
Awesome. Gentlemen, on that note, I'd like us to park it there. Hey?
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
we're crossing the long form line.
Really,
So
I'm gonna stopwatch right here. It's not bad.
I'll share it on another episode. But gents, I'd like to park it there. I think it's been a very, very interesting chat. And what's great is that we are extending on this idea of, I don't know, I think today's conversation was very interesting because ultimately, of the things that men are afraid to express, I think the things that they desire most in a relationship is probably like up there, you know? The room to cry, the room to be emotional, blah, blah, blah. But the room to say, hey man, this is what I actually desire. I really low key, it makes me feel good. It's what I expect in a relationship other than what society says you must give me. I think that's a very, very unique chat to have. And so, yeah, I'd really like to thank you, Kanye, for taking the time out to come through. I think your perspective is a particularly rich one because for a number of reasons. One, your upbringing. The second one, you know, I wish we could have had your puppy here because I'm sure there's more where that came from in terms of the gems.
For sure.
But finally, the navigation of entrepreneurship, which is one that I'm sure a lot of young men are able to relate to and be like, actually, because one thing about being an entrepreneur is that it seeps into every area of your life. So that perspective about, I'm not going to get a paycheck at the end of the month, things might pop off in 3 months, are you willing to go for the long haul, is a question that a lot of young dudes also need to think about before asking someone out. Is this the type of person that would? And if they are, awesome, we can navigate a healthy relationship. If they're not, chances are this won't be a healthy relationship. But be honest. And that honesty prevents a lot of unnecessary conflict, and unnecessary conflict also avoids some of those darker parts of your personality coming out. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I think for the audience out there that's watching and listening to this episode, vulnerability, man, that's one of our biggest messages on this platform. And I think always navigate from a position of vulnerability. And I'm glad the word catfish was so prominent in today's, because again, that tweet,
striking word.
It's that tweet wasn't from a psychologist. It was just a provocative word, but it's worth having a conversation about at the end of the day. So thank you so much to everyone. I want to thank the people who put this show together. I don't think we have their names here, so I'm just going to thank them as I see them. Emil for the sound. I'd like to thank Tabo for the production, Mukwena for marketing, Muhale for the graphics. I'd like to thank Lou for the production, Empire Partner Foundation as well for providing the premises.
Look at this place.
Yeah, this office is really, really beautiful. I think I'm just going to come here and study at some point, but it's really generous of them to give us this premises. So the coffee was also pretty good. So, so thank you so much to EPF. They are in Ilovo. They support young people, whether it be businesses, creatives, all of that. Thank you to everyone who put this episode together, and we will see you next time.
Oh, 5 stars.
Oh, and please,
5 stars, bro.
Honestly, you'll find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. Please leave a comment, like, subscribe. Only 5 stars. If you don't do, let me give you the if not. What happens if they don't give us 5 stars?
Well, it's pretty simple, isn't it?
It is.
Ban you from YouTube.
Yeah, that's it.
The whole thing.
Yeah, we know we can report you to people. So
cut off the cable to your devices.
So thank you so much, guys, for tuning into today's episode, and we'll see you next time.